Hello and welcome to today's webinar on on tracking performance measures using the VISTA Impact App. My name is Andy King. I'll be your host for today's session. In this webinar, we provide an overview of how to use the VISTA Impact App to measure your VISTA service and track the outcomes of that work. You'll leave this webinar with some next steps on how you can use the VISTA Impact App to build meaningful, effective relationships with your program and how you can easily communicate your results with your supervisor. As I mentioned, my name is Andy King. I'm a training specialist with AmeriCorps VISTA, and our presenter today is Patrick Triano. Patrick is the director of the VISTA Training and Outreach Unit for the AmeriCorps VISTA program, headquartered in Washington, D.C. Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Andy. So, in today's agenda, we'll take a quick look at measuring performance in general and focus on VISTA's capacity building metrics. From there, we'll transition to the Impact App so that we can see how the app relates to the capacity building performance measures. And then, of course, we'll have time to answer your questions or respond to your comments. So why do we measure performance? Well, performance measurement focuses us on the purpose or outcomes of a particular project or endeavor. It substantiates our gut feeling of whether we're making progress or not, and adds a valuable perspective on whether we should continue in the manner we're working or not. In a sense, the measures keep us honest in terms of the aim of the project we started out with. Measurement lets us know as project managers, you as VISTAs and the project director, if we're on track, if it's likely that we'll attain the objectives and the long-term goals of the project. And performance measurement also allows us to adapt our original plans to align the project with realities we may not have understood in the beginning. And finally, performance measurement lends data in telling our project story. In this era of data, if there is no data or evidence to support the claims of a project, that project is not on firm foundation. Congress, taxpayers, and our neighbors expect measurement and evidence that we're succeeding in what we set out to do. So what is performance measurement? It goes back to the question of recognizing that a performance measure tells a story. And to be clear, not the whole story. An important story, but not the entire one. But one way that we know whether our work is affecting an organization and community is through certain measures. The performance measurement is an ongoing, systematic process of tracking your program's measurable outputs and outcomes. An output tabulates, calculates, or records the actual products or services delivered by a program, such as the number of students receiving tutoring or the number of houses built. Outputs are the amount of service provided. They measure the completion of activities and document the fact that individuals received services, products that were created, or programs that were developed. They answer the question, how much service did we perform, or what products did we develop? Outcomes, on the other hand, reflect the changes or benefits that occur. Outcomes can reflect changes in individuals, organizations, communities, or the environment. This may include changes in attitudes, knowledge, behavior, or conditions. And that depends on what your goal was in the first place. The ultimate outcome, or better referred to as the impact, that the VISTA program intends in all communities is to alleviate or eliminate poverty. But our projects in which you serve also define their outcomes on an individual and organizational basis and focus on certain aspects of poverty in your community. All right. You all know that VISTA's work focuses on capacity building. The purpose for you having been assigned to a community and an organization is to build that organization's capacity so that it can better serve the community. An organization, in terms of its building its capacity, will have identified a need for one or more of the resources or abilities listed here. Greater ability to serve more people, serve new or different groups of people, provide new or expanded types of service, achieve better outcomes for the people the organization serves, which is to say that the impact of the services offered by that organization are broader or deeper. The organization may, on the other hand, wish to provide improved outcomes at the same level of resources, or to maintain its quality of services using fewer resources. And finally, an organization may need to generate resources, funding, volunteers, or partnerships. To summarize or encapsulate that list, capacity addresses scale or reach, which is to strengthen the ability to serve more people, serve new populations, and/or provide new or expanded types of services. Effectiveness, to improve the ability to achieve outcomes for beneficiaries or community members, resulting in better success rates or better quality of outcomes. Efficiency, which is to do more with the same or less. That is, offer services with the same level of resources, or improve or maintain consistent quality of services with fewer resources. And then finally, leverage resources within and outside of the community. If you reflect on your VADs, your tasks fall into one or more of these four capacity building categories. All right. Our efforts in building capacity addresses the systems or the aspects of the organization involved with technology, financial resources, volunteer resources, community assessments, outreach, material development, which would include systems development, and the expansion or strengthening of partnerships, networking, as we said in PSO. And then to close the loop, if the outputs or the tasks outlined in your VAD are attained, they lead to the intended outcomes. For example, more people served, more services provided with a greater resource base, then if the project's theory of change is correct, the impact on the community is that more people are employed, housed, fed, and are healthy. Okay. Let's address the specific measures that VISTA employs. All of our projects are involved in one or more of these measures. This permits us to focus our resources and to roll up these data in a coherent fashion to speak to our funders and our supporters to justify and to be held accountable to the work that you, as individuals, do every day. Now, in this list, please note that some of these measures have a check mark. Those reflect measures immediately and easily captured by the Impact App. The chevrons reflect measures that could be captured by you and the project, either through the app or another system, but they require a little extra effort and coordination to capture the data. All right, that said, the data we capture as the VISTA program are the number of community volunteers recruited or managed, the number of organizations implementing effective volunteer management practices, the number of organizations that receive capacity building services because of you, and the number of organizations that report capacity building has made them more efficient thanks to you. And remember, efficient, the definition for efficient was to deliver the same quality of services with fewer resources. Continuing the VISTA measures then, the number of organizations reporting that capacity building activities has helped to make the organization more effective, which is to say the services that you have rendered have a deeper impact on the community members. The number of new systems and business processes used by that organization, and that's either technology, performance management, training, etc. And the number of additional activities completed and or program outputs produced. Continuing, the number of staff and community volunteers receiving training because of you, number of organizations that have experienced an increase in requests for their programs and services, number of additional types of services offered by organizations, number of organizations that completed a community assessment, identifying the goals and recommendations for the project. And finally, cash and in-kind resources leveraged. This is a huge effort that is carried out by all of you. An example then. You organize regular fundraising events for an organization's after-school program. These events increase community awareness about the program and result in measurable outcomes, such as an increase in dollars, in-kind donations, repeat donors, and numbers of volunteers. The increase in resources allows the organization to expand its after-school services to 2 new locations. This outcome represents a change in condition, greater capacity to serve more, perhaps new clients, and perhaps offer new services. Okay. Next, let's take a look at the AmeriCorps VISTA Impact App and see how they relate to these measures. Now, there are many challenges around performance measurement. Validity and verification of the data is not the least of those challenges. That is to ask, are we sure that the data is accurate? And what systems do we have to verify the data? The VISTA Impact App is designed to help you capture data in real time so that you don't lose it and you don't end up guessing months after the event what actually happened. And you can verify that it occurs because it will be date stamped and noted where and with whom it happened. So you can use the app to capture data from any location and send real-time reports to your supervisor as well as to yourself from your smartphone, tablet, or desktop computer. It's important to note, however, that the Impact App is not an official system of record. It's intended to help you recall activities and is not meant to replace any collection instrument within your organization or any other reporting requirement. All right. So what then are the benefits to using the app? The app promotes accurate reporting and provides uniform definitions for the measures. That is, we clearly and strictly define terms such as resource, volunteer, management of volunteer, or veteran. The Impact App is already divided into different categories by performance measure. So once you complete an activity, you can track your progress and send it to your supervisor directly from the app. The app's also accessible through a variety of devices, as I said earlier. VISTAs do not have to use your smartphone exclusively to enter data. If you're in a more remote area and do not have access to Wi-Fi, for example, you don't have to use your data plan to capture and send this information. You can access your account from a computer or tablet. All the information will be saved and synchronized to make it easy to switch between devices based on where you're located and when you want to enter information. So how does it work? The app is technically a mobile web page, meaning that no downloading is necessary. The link to connect is available through the VISTA campus, and it can be bookmarked in your internet favorites to appear as an app icon for easy access. As was previously mentioned, the data are accessible through a variety of devices, meaning that you can use your smartphone, tablet, or computer. As long as you have internet access, you can use the tool. All right, so now let's take a look at the Impact App itself, and to do that, we are going to share my screen, which is always a little scary. So hang on with me as I get to the app. And I believe we've made it. All right. This is the home page. It's customized for mobile devices, and I'm showing it on a widescreen computer. So some of the features may look a little stretched or strange. My Report is where VISTAs will track their activities. Settings allows users to add their supervisor as well as your own email and all site information necessary. The glossary provides definitions to key terms used throughout the app. As I say, when you're working with performance measures, the definition of the terms you use within those measures must be clear and strictly adhered to, hence the glossary. And then help offers answers to frequently asked questions. So let's then take a look at what's under My Report and see if they don't look familiar to the performance measures we've been discussing. All right. So there are categories for each frequently used performance measures. You should probably review what's contained in each of these before you start documenting an activity. Entries are listed by order of date, chronologically, with the most recent first. And you can add an entry by selecting the Add button. So let's explore just a little bit. Let's try resources. And as you can see, I already have $100,002. I can track either in kind or cash. Check the cash. And as you can see, I got $100,000 and $2. Under the $100,000, you can see I got that on December 10th. It's given to me by Paul Montero, Esquire. And under the notes, I have that this was a check in support of the 50th anniversary of VISTA. All right. So going back to that issue of validity and verification, you can make as many notes as necessary, and of course, it's all time-stamped. The dollar amounts, you can't forget the numbers. It's hardwired in. But the notes also give you the background to jog your memory or to remember who gave it to you, why, and how can you go back out and ask for more. All right. Going back here for a second. Volunteers, you can see it's similar to all of the measurement around volunteer training, volunteer management, veterans and military family. What's not immediately intuitive is My Site and additional activities. Categories listed under My Site are used to track many of the capacity building activities that may not fit into other categories, right? Management practices, community assessment. See if there's anything under community assessment. No, I didn't add anything. But you can see, you simply hit add, and that's how you track. Additional activities, if you remember the chevrons that I referred to on the list of performance measures, additional activities is used to track the activities that may not directly align with another category, may not easily be trackable. However, all the activities are tracked in the app should fall within the performance measures that are in your VAD. So if there's something that's in your VAD that your supervisor is also having you do, then you can add whatever category you want. You can entitle it, and you can track it as you choose. All right. Finally, sending. You can send the reports to your supervisor or to yourself by clicking the Send button on the report's home page, which is here. All right? All right. So, next step. Let me stop sharing my screen and go back to the slide deck. So, how to use the Impact app to connect to your supervisor? First, I suggest that you become familiar with VISTA's performance measures themselves. There are a number of ways that you can do that. They're located on nationalservice.gov in the CNCS Knowledge Network. And there's also a link in the web links box in the lower right corner of the app screen. Also, discuss the performance measures with your supervisor. And as an aside, I attend supervisor orientation as often as I can. And your supervisors and your projects are as focused and as interested in performance measurement and how to capture accurate data as we are. So once you're into the app, an email will be sent to your supervisor to alert her or him. Then you can choose to send reports to your supervisor whenever you're ready. Ask them when they want them, but you can send them reports weekly, monthly, or semi-annually. And then finally, explore the app on the campus. We believe it's intuitive and user-friendly. If you have any questions, there are directions on how to contact us for guidance or technical assistance on the app. And let's touch on resources that are available to you that you can find on the VISTA campus and on the National Service Knowledge Network. All right. So all of the performance measures for the corporation are reflected on the site that you see here. And you can easily find the performance measures for VISTA. Each of the performance measures will be categorized by the programs in the Corporation for National and Community Service. Also, the Impact app can be found at the VISTA campus. Just use the search engine, ask for Impact app, and it'll bring you right to it. It's really very easy. Or it's impact.vistacampus.gov. And if you need assistance with troubleshooting or have any questions about the tool, contact us by sending an email to this address, which is also captured on the Impact app. All right, so there we have it. Now, Andy, I'll give it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for that really clear and complete look at the VISTA Impact app and how it relates to the performance measures. And so now we're going to turn to the audience and see what questions have come up. And as a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question through WebEx, use the Q&A panel, which is to the right side of your screen, sort of the right lower quarter of your screen. Submit your question there, and we'll line it up for Patrick. And then I'm going to ask the operator to give us instructions for asking questions by phone. Operator?
Yes, thank you. At this time, we will begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question from the phone lines, please press *1. You will need to unmute your line and record your first and last name clearly when prompted. To withdraw your question, please star 2. Once again, if you would like to ask a question from the phone lines, please press star 1 and record your name. One moment for our first question, please.
Great, thank you. And while we're waiting for questions to come in by phone, we do have a few already that have come in through WebEx. First of all, Catherine asks if accessing the app through a computer, through the web, is there a certain internet browser that needs to be used? Will it work in Google Chrome?
To the best of my knowledge, it has been tested on every major, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Web browser?
Yeah, web browser, thank you. On every one of them. So you should be able to use your favorite.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also on mobile phones, whether you're using an Android device or an iOS device or a Windows-based phone, it will work there as well.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah. Next up is a question from Adam. And this was when this came in when you were looking at some of the performance measures about capacity building and the number of organizations that that received capacity building services. And Adam asks, if we only serve at one organization, how could we count the number of organizations, where we built capacity?
That's right. That's right. Now, there are VISTAs who, how shall I say, are located in one organization but do outreach or serve with a number of organizations who are affiliated with your primary site. So that's one way in which numbers of organizations could be counted. However, if you work at one organization but you are not the only VISTA serving with your organization, so that, for example, there are a number of sub-sites, the purpose of the app then is to permit the supervisor to collect all of your input, ensure that the organization that you're counting as one is different from VISTA number 2's organization, and that they're counting at one. So ultimately, it's the responsibility of the project or the supervisor to coordinate all of the VISTA's data, ensure that the data isn't being duplicated. That's part of the verification and validity of the data, and then roll it up together and send it to us here at headquarters. It's a great question. It's the one that we had to chew on for a while, Adam. But I hope that makes sense and answers your question. And that was also why some in that list had a check and others had a chevron. Those with a check, an individual could easily count. But those with a chevron requires a bit of organization and coordination from the supervisor's perspective, a little more coordination from the supervisor's desk.
All right. Thank you for that answer. Now let's go to the phones and see if we have any questions lined up there.
At this time, we have no questions from the phone lines. However, again, just a reminder to guests on the lines, if you wish to ask a question from the phone lines, please press star 1. You will need to unmute your line and record your first and last name clearly. One moment, please.
All right. Well, we have plenty of questions that have come in through the WebEx, so we have no shortage.
Oh, really? I was hoping that it was just so crystal clear and user-friendly. We had no questions. Okay.
Absolutely. So, here, Michael has a question that he asked you to demonstrate something in the app. So, Scott, if you can give Patrick the ball again, and Patrick, if you can then share the app. So,
He's asking me to do this because I'm shaking my fist at him. I hate having to go on to my, I made it. Okay, everything's
right.
well.
Yeah. And we have a couple like this, so I'll cue these up together.
Okay, good.
So Michael asks, please demonstrate the manner in which an existing entry can be modified. For example, how would the military veterans entry be modified?
How would it be modified? Well, let's go in and let's see. So you can see our categories here. How many veterans were served? How many veterans' family members were served? How many active duty military service members are served? And active duty military family members are served. So those are our categories. I'm going to randomly pick one, hoping, this is for Scott, right, Andy? Hoping that I get the Scott's question. So here's the easy one. Veteran family members served. Let's say that Dad and the 2 kids were served. And let's say that I did this on Monday. I think that was, oh no, that was Sunday. There's Monday. And let's make a note that we sent out volunteers to the nearby base at Fort Dix to assess the needs of the families living there. And I'm going to say I am done. And I hope that answers the question.
So he was asking, Michael was asking about how you could modify an existing entry.
So if I've already put this entry in, he's asking how do I fix it?
I believe so.
And no one's ever asked me that before. I think if the date is, I think I'm going to check this, but I'm pretty sure I can't go back and check. No, well, maybe I can. Let's see. But see, I can only do this now because I haven't logged out and saved it. I believe you would have to trash it and save the pertinent information and re-input it. I don't believe you can simply go back a month later and change it. But let's see. I shouldn't be playing like this. But, Michael, thank you for making me do this. Let's see if I can change it. Maybe I can. And indeed, I can. Which means to me, you've got to be honest. We did not lock it out so that once you've saved it, you can't go back to change it.
Yeah, and I think that sort of underscores the point you made earlier, Patrick, about, this is a tool really for collecting data, and it's not the official reporting system of record. So this is like a worksheet, and you can go back and, use an eraser to update things, but it's not the end-all, be-all reporting.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay, so while you're still there in the app, we have another question that came in from Rachel.
Yeah.
And she says, is there a way to put the Impact app on the app homepage of a phone or tablet like other apps so you can access it easily? Or is it only available through a web browser?
No, I believe this is what I've been told, and frankly, I'm not geeky enough to have done this myself. But you save it under Favorites, and you can drag the icon then onto your screen, so that it shows up pretty much like an app, but it's actually just an icon for one of your favorites in your web browser.
Yeah, I don't think you'll be able to demonstrate this
I can't
on WebEx because obviously you're on a computer, but I think if you click on Home, we may be able to see the place where that is available.
You think settings?
No, I think you'll have to log out. It's when you first log in to it.
Let's see. Oops. Welcome to my email. Stop it. Maybe here. Nope.
Yeah, it's going to take you right back in. So tell you what, Patrick, if you'll stop sharing, we do have a screenshot of this. So if you'll stop sharing, and Scott will take back the rights, and we go to slide 21. And this is a screenshot of the initial screen when you're first accessing the app. And
there you go.
Install VISTA Impact App to your device. Tap the share icon below and add to the home screen. So this, I think, was from an iPhone. And the share icon is that one in the middle. It's like a box with an arrow coming out of it. It could look different on different phones or devices. But if you click that icon, then a little window will pop up and you can choose Add to Home Screen. It's like the only button on there. And if you add to your home screen, then it does put a little tile on, on your phone or your tablet. So it looks like an app. And essentially, as you said, Patrick, it's really a favorite. And when you click on it, it will open your browser and take you right to the app.
Thank you for that, Andy.
Sure. All right. Well, we've got a bunch of other questions here that won't require you to do much navigating, so you'll be happy about that.
I'm best at not navigating.
Here's another great question I haven't heard before. Amanda asks, in terms of sustainability, are the apps transferable to the next VISTA? So will the next VISTA have access to the information that I've collected this year?
The VISTA would have access through your supervisor. And we have it in a database, but we don't intend to actually share it in that manner. If it were lost, we could retrieve it for the supervisor, but we'll rely on the supervisor to coordinate that data.
Great. And Kristen asks, are there plans to make this into a downloadable app?
There are not presently. It's a bit challenging to do that, especially because we want to ensure that the app is what we refer to as 508 compliant, meaning compliant to the Americans with Disabilities Act. So those who are blind, especially, and most apps are not accessible to them. So this was one way in which we could meet the requirements of that law. And there were other challenges. So currently, the short answer is no, we don't have plans in the immediate future.
Yeah, and Patrick, I would add that the benefit of not having a downloadable app means that the data aren't stored on your device, they're stored in the cloud, and then you can access it from any device. So, today you're on your cell phone, tomorrow on an iPad, and then you're back in the office on a computer, and you can access all of it, the same data from any of those devices because it is built this way.
Right. Right.
All right, so shifting gears a little bit, Charlene has a question that refers back to the performance measures. And she says, I'm not completely understanding how to track the organizations with volunteer management practices. So for example, if organizations already have volunteer management practices in place, do we track them? Is it trying to address whether we're improving their existing practices or helping them implement new ones?
There are some performance measures that are not exactly quantitative, and this is clearly one of them. So it's not as simple as simply tapping a number into the app and saying, well, we've got 2 organizations with 3 new effective practices. So that's part of the meaning of our saying that the app is not a system of record, and that some measures require, how shall I say, other measurement practices coordinated through your organization with your supervisor in order to determine and clearly define what was the base level of management practice. Was it considered effective or efficient by the organization, established by the definitions of those terms within the measure, and then be able to count in that organization or organizations, depending on how many you're working with, the number of practices or systems that are either more fully developed or developed and put in place. So it becomes a little more complicated once you start looking at something like effective practices. Of course, you wouldn't. Our anticipation, by the way, is not that you go out and you start measuring all of this stuff that's available to you on the app, but that, of course, you're measuring that which is defined in your VAD, and you're using the app to capture the measures that you're responsible for as defined in your VAD. So if your VAD has you developing effective practices of volunteer management, for example, then that calls for a deeper discussion with the project manager and or the supervisor to determine what your base data is and how you all agree on how to measure an improvement in effectiveness. So those are some of the other challenges behind performance measure. But basically what it comes down to is if it's not as simple as counting resources or counting heads, then you really need to consider where are you starting, what are you aiming for, and what's the best way to measure the progress of what you're aiming for, in this case, around effective practices.
All right, great.
I hope that helps.
Terrific, I think.
And
so.
I do recommend to the person asking the question that they visit the performance measures page that we referred to earlier on the Knowledge Network. There are a number of tutorials there, and they may give her greater insight on how to approach measuring effective practice if that is part of her service at her site.
All right, terrific. Well, it looks like there are lots of resources out there around the performance measures, and certainly the glossary definitions so that we're all measuring the same thing, and then for more on the background and the nuance, the performance measures website address, which was shared. Let's go to the phone now to see if we have any callers online. Operator, do we have any questions on the phone? She may be getting someone in queue right now.
Or she's writing to you.
Quite possibly. So Patrick, just to follow up, remember the demonstration you did before about updating a previously entered thing? So Michael, who asked that question originally, wrote back to clarify. And
Troublemaker, Michael. Yes.
And he said, actually, what I wanted to ask was, is there a way to change the title of the entry, the heading of the category? So instead of saying, how many veterans families, could I change that to school families or to some other category that I want to?
Let me see. Can I share again? Can you let me share, Scott? Thank you. Michael, darn you. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, there we are. Go to additional activities. As opposed to changing this, go to additional activities, and then you can say school what?
School family is what he suggested was something of interest to him.
Yeah, okay. I don't know what a school family is, but I can say families in school-based activities. So that's your new category. And now, I don't want to do that. Go back. And now I want to add to it. Here we go. So the family, Morales, the date, today, and note, they were just great. And there you have it. You can add all the categories you want. It is why we added the additional categories. We were going to steer clear of adding other categories, but there was a pretty strong demand from the VISTAs that they would like to capture other activities that we may not be measuring, but they, the VISTA, and the organizations are measuring.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, we got a question from Dana, and then before I could even raise it, he or she, I'm not sure which, sent a follow-up to it, so it's kind of a couple parts.
Okay.
So she says, I noticed that the app records direct donations received. How could we track a budget that was already established by our sponsoring organization? How would I track, say, doing a volunteer presentation that resulted in a donation to my organization, but that may not have gone directly to my project or my cause, as Dana says it.
Does she follow up to clarify, just to make sure that I don't answer a question she's not asking?
Yeah, so let me give you the second part here. I have to scroll for a second. So Dana says, on the flip side, what if my organization receives a donation directly for my project, my cause, but does not inform me? Our donation structure is such that everything goes into a pool, and then we justify expenses or have funds allocated. I'm curious about how I would track that.
Okay, let's see if I understand the question and if I can answer it well. In the first case, I'm only slightly perplexed by my project versus my organization. So let's say that, I don't know, I've run an outreach event. I don't know, maybe a pancake breakfast, and it was in hopes of developing partnerships in the community and potential donors. And the donor does not give directly to the VISTA, but rather says, I am going to send a check to the organization for $200. Then I would record the resources as being, let's see, if it's cash, then I would put the dollar amount, and of course the date, who told me, and here's where I would record what exactly happened. That a check was written to the organization on the above date due to a pancake breakfast that was held on this date. So that's how I would track that. The second question, though, that she asks, Dana, I believe, that there isn't a simple system, that is to say a tool or an app, that can ensure that an organization is coordinating information with its staff and vistas. So my only suggestion in that case would be first to raise that question with the supervisor. The supervisor has more insight than I do right now as to where that money would go, how it would arrive, and who monitors that fund. I would then follow up with that information in hand and ask the person who monitors that fund to be sure to alert you as to when funds arrive, particularly if you know that you're about to conduct an event whose purpose is outreach and resource development for your organization. We have similar cases here where resources can go in a number of different directions. So we need to know what the base is when we walk out, and then have those offices or individuals let us know whether resources came in either clearly as a result of our activities or possibly as a result of our activities. And then I'm afraid you would have to follow up on those possibilities to ask that donor whether he or she donated because of an activity that you ran. As I say, there's no tool that I know that can ensure the coordination, but I would work through your supervisor who has better insight into your organization to help you coordinate the individuals or the offices that might help you track resources that may have ordinarily gotten lost in the mix if you didn't ask. I hope that wasn't too long-winded or convoluted.
No, I think that's helpful. And one other insight that occurred to me is it seemed that in this question about donations and, oh, what if a donation comes in that I had nothing to do with? How do I get that information? And I think the app is really designed to track the results of the service that the VISTA is providing. So if things are coming to the organization that aren't related to what the VISTA is doing, then they don't need to be tracked in the app. Isn't that right?
That's correct. Yes. If I misunderstood the question, forgive me.
Well, that was sort of the follow-on part, yeah. Yeah.
My assumption is exactly what you're saying, Andy, which is your role as a VISTA using this tool, or in fact any tracking tool, is to track your activities and the results of your activities. And it's the role of the organization or the supervisor to coordinate and collect all of the data and roll it up. You needn't do the roll-up. The supervisor and or the organization will do that. And if money comes in, resources come in that are not related to you, then it's not your place to count that. It's only resources that have been generated due to your efforts.
Great. Thank you for clarifying.
Thanks for the clarification, Andy. Yes.
Sure thing. Let's pause and operator, do we have any questions waiting on the phone?
We have no questions from the phone lines at this time.
Okay. Well, we still have more here in the WebEx, so we'll continue. Sarah asks a good question. She says, does the app keep everything like a rolling total? And when we send it over to our supervisor, they get everything, say, from November and December?
Yes.
All right. That was a quick, succinct answer. And, of course, I don't have the next one queued up.
Sorry. Let me elaborate. Yes, it will collect all of it, add it up, and it will be a rolling total.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So here's another question. It's similar to one that you answered already around capacity building measures. So Athena asks, regarding capacity building, how do we measure creating a position? She says, I am the first volunteer coordinator, and how do we measure developing a quality service, such as developing volunteer orientation when there wasn't one previously?
Okay, let me make sure again that I understand this question. You know, the interesting thing, now that we don't use the telephone very much, is it really tests our ability to articulate in writing what we mean. So the first part was, how do we measure a new position? Am I correct, Andy?
Yeah, she says, how do we measure creating a position?
So a position to me would mean, for example, the position of volunteer coordinator for the organization.
Yeah, I think that's what she's asking. And maybe she's...
And that's a really good question. So that, to me, falls under both practice and system. And like all of this, it's really important to coordinate and discuss with your supervisor so that you're not making an assumption of what to call it. If I were your supervisor, I would go in one of two directions depending on how I wanted to measure it. I would either call that an effective practice, and in fact we have, if I remember correctly, let's see, under volunteers, that's management of volunteers, the training, hours of service, let's see, anything? Nope, that wouldn't be good enough. And that wouldn't be good enough. No. I would ask him or her, how do you want to count that, the creation of that position? As a system related to effective recruitment? And if that were the case, I think, and let's say she says yes, we'll call that systems. Then I would put it under, let me see, I don't think it's under track new systems. I'd probably put it under a new system or business process. Now, we would also have to go to the definition of system and business process that the glossary will give us to ensure that our definition of a new position makes good sense. So we'd go down here, we'd find business processes, variety of different supports, and we'd go through here, and I'm not going to waste everybody's time doing it, but we'd go through here to see, is there something here that says, yes, developing a position which is sustainable is a capacity building effort and a business process, and therefore we'll count it as such. But you also have to make sure that the supervisor agrees that that's the best way to count it. If he or she doesn't, then I would suggest putting it under other activities. That's my best guess and my best approach right now.
All right, terrific. Thank you. Lauren has a question. She says, will we be able to track our service hours as we clock in and clock out throughout the week by using this app?
It's not meant to be a time and attendance, like a web-based time and attendance sheet. So if somebody wanted you to do that, I would probably, again, put it under that catch-all of additional activities. But it's really not meant to do that at all. This is really about performance measurement. And yes, you could argue that your hours are a measurement of your performance, but it really wasn't intended to do that. I'd avoid it if you could.
All right, great. Do we have any questions on the phone at this time?
We have no questions from the phone lines at this time, sir.
All right.
However, if you
Go ahead.
However, again, just a reminder to guests on the lines, if you do wish to ask a question, simply dial *1. You'll need to unmute your line and record your first and last name clearly when prompted. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Alonzo asks, is there a way we could print out the collective data that we've entered?
Yes, you can. You send it to yourself, and then you can print it out.
Terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we've covered all of the questions. I'm just going back through. A question came in just a little bit ago, maybe when you were describing something else. I don't have exactly the context. But the question is, and I think it refers to entering information into the app, say a particular service delivered or money raised or whatever. The question is this done per event?
It was meant to be in real time per event. And if you see a reason not to do it that way, I suppose you could. But it really was meant to be activity by activity in real time.
All right, great.
I have a question from the phone lines at this time.
Okay, terrific. Let's hear that one.
And that question comes from Sarah. Sarah, your line is open at this time to ask you your question.
Hi, Sarah, go ahead.
Hi. I had actually asked, it's kind of a follow-up to a question that I had asked previously. It was about the running total with the Impact app and our supervisors getting a whole thing with November's info and December's info.
Yes.
Is there a way that they wouldn't get bombarded with that much information? I know if my supervisor were to get that much information, she wouldn't even look at it. She would just toss it. She wouldn't even look at it. Is there a way to only send them just 1 month's information?
Well, fact is, I have to back up. Why is your supervisor just tossing the information that you're sending them?
She is really, really busy. The type of job that I am at, I'm actually at a CISA, and my supervisor is extremely busy.
Mm-hmm.
And so her day is extremely packed. I have a set time with her, and I only have so much time that I'm able to do face-to-face with her.
Right.
And to be able to send her, with the amount of information that I have in there, and to send her stuff from a previous month's worth and the current month's worth of information.
I see.
She's not even going to look at it. She's just going to toss the email. She won't even look at it because she doesn't have the time to look at the email because it's too much information.
Well, let me ask you this. Would she have the time to look at all of the entries that say December as opposed to going back to all the entries starting in June? Because they're all chronologically listed. So she'd only have to look at the bottom of the list if she wants you to report on a monthly basis. She only has to look at the month of December and pay no attention to the other months. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm just trying to save her from having to.
Yep. Yeah, I appreciate the position that you're in. The only other thing that I can think of, if you wanted to do her a service,
Yep.
would be for you to print it out yourself and literally cut and paste the month's activity into a Word document and send her the Word document.
And that's what I've been doing.
There you go.
That's what I have been doing. Only because this poor lady, she's extremely busy. And
yeah.
so I'm just, like I said, if I send her something that has, 100 things in it, she's not going to look at it. She won't look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Well, it
Thank you.
Sounds like you're as smart, if not smarter than me. So that's all I can think of, though.
All right. Thank you for your assistance.
Sure, you're welcome. Andy, I'm also seeing we may be a bit over time.
Well, we've got about 9 minutes now, I think, until the end of our Q&A period. Do we have any other callers on the phone?
No other callers from the phone lines at this time.
Okay, great. Well, we do have a couple other questions, and I think we'll be able to wrap them up pretty quickly. So Patrick, I think you'll like this one. Christopher says, my VAD tasks me with developing a business plan to create a new branch of the organization that will allow it to generate funds and more capacity for the organization. How would you recommend I track this? That is, developing this business plan for this new function in the organization.
Wow. So, again, I would check the definition of business process. It sounds to me as if the organization is trying to develop a function that will, A, be sustainable in and of itself, and B, sustain the organization, because it sounds like resource development and outreach. I would therefore say that on a quantitative level, and you're probably not going to want to hear this, but on a quantitative level, your numbers are going to be really boring because it's either going to be number of processes for the organization that have been created. It will either be 0 or it will be 1. But I'm pretty sure if you're only creating one new function, it won't go over 1. However, if in creating this new process, there are a number of functions that fall under it, right? Or let's call it a unit. If you're creating an outreach and resource development unit, then I would look at the functions of that unit. Clearly define those functions, and each of those functions would, if I'm not mistaken, fall under the definition of business process. Then your numbers might be a little more exciting. But I do, I'm joking about it, but I do want to be serious that the app and much of the reporting around measures capture only the quantitative data. And we all of a sudden underestimate the importance of the number 1. That, oh, you've only created 1 new project or 1 new unit. It's a huge task. And no one should reasonably expect those numbers to be gigantic. All right, so let's not all become number geeks where we've got to have big numbers or we have no meaning in our service. Okay, that said, that put aside. Look at the functions within the unit that you have been tasked to create. They would represent new systems or new business processes. But it's also important for you to capture the qualitative data as well as the quantitative. And I'm really glad that you raised that question, because right now we're only talking quantitative data. And you know significance of your work is more often qualitative and not quantitative. I think that's all I can say right now, Andy, about that.
Okay. Terrific. Well, I mean, I think that it's a complex issue, and how do we measure the really complex and sophisticated work that VISTA members are doing and reduce it to numbers? Right. In some cases, it's just not possible.
It's either not possible, or, as I say, the numbers are underwhelming, though the meaning of the number is really significant.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you for that. I want to thank everyone for their questions today, and let you know that we do have an evaluation for today's session, which you'll see opening up on the right side of your screen. So as we wrap up, if you'll take just a moment to give us your thoughts about how you felt about this presentation, what we might do differently in the future, and if you have ideas for the kinds of topics that you're interested in, we would love to hear those as well. I want to say a special thanks to Patrick Triano for this presentation today, and really for all of the work he's done before to build this app and to put it together and to tie the VISTA performance measures into a tool that's so user-friendly and easy to use. So thank you, Patrick, for that. We do want to, of course, see you again on one of these webinars, and I invite you to come again in the future. In January, we'll be doing a session on strategic networking to help you figure out how you can build your personal and professional networks. So you can look for an email invitation with the details on how you can join that session. And of course, you'll find a recording from this presentation as well as all the other webinars that we've done on the VISTA campus in the webinar section. So thank you all again for your participation. Enjoy the rest of your day.